July 24, 1915, Eastland tragedy. The SS Eastland, a passenger steamship, capsized in the Chicago River while moored to the dock on the city's riverfront. The disaster took place between Clark and LaSalle Streets and resulted in the deaths of 844 passengers and crew members. The Eastland tragedy remains the deadliest maritime disaster in the history of the Great Lakes and one of the worst in American history. The victims were predominantly employees of the Western Electric Company, who had gathered with their families to attend a company picnic in Michigan City, Indiana. The SS Eastland was originally built in 1903 by the Michigan Steamship Company. It was designed for speed and shallow draft navigation on the Great Lakes. Over the years, the vessel was modified several times, including structural changes that affected its stability. Following the sinking of the RMS Titanic in 1912, Congress passed the Seamen's Act of 1915, which mandated that ships increase the number of lifeboats on board. Although intended to improve safety, this requirement added weight to the already top-heavy Eastland, further compromising its balance. On the morning of the disaster, approximately 2,500 people had boarded the Eastland, which was one of 5 vessels chartered for the excursion. Shortly after boarding began, around 6:30 a.m., the ship exhibited noticeable listing while still tied to the dock. Passengers moved about the decks, contributing to shifts in weight distribution. By 7:28 a.m., the Eastland rolled over onto its port side in just 20 feet of water. The catastrophe occurred so suddenly that hundreds of people were trapped below decks or crushed by falling structures and debris. Rescue efforts began immediately, with nearby vessels, police, firefighters, and bystanders assisting in the recovery of survivors and victims. Temporary morgues were established, most notably at the 2nd Regiment Armory, where families gathered to identify their relatives. The death toll included entire families, young children, and several newlyweds. Of the 844 confirmed dead, the majority were of Czech, Polish, German, and Hungarian descent, reflecting the demographic composition of the Western Electric workforce based in Cicero, Illinois. The disaster had profound legal and regulatory consequences. Inquiries were conducted by local, state, and federal authorities. Initial accusations targeted the ship's captain, William H. Pedersen, and crew members, but no one was ultimately held criminally responsible. Investigators concluded that the overloading and modifications over the years created a critical instability that was ignored or poorly managed by both the owners and inspectors. Civil lawsuits filed by the families of the victims faced legal barriers and protracted proceedings, with limited compensation delivered. The Eastland disaster led to public demands for stricter oversight of ship design, inspection, and passenger safety on inland waters. The incident also brought attention to the working conditions and lives of immigrant laborers in industrial America. The Western Electric Company, deeply affected by the tragedy, provided financial support to the families of the deceased and implemented new safety policies for future employee events. Despite its magnitude, the Eastland disaster did not receive the same national recognition as other maritime disasters like the Titanic. However, it left a lasting impact on the city of Chicago and maritime regulations in the United States. Memorials and plaques were later erected near the site of the capsizing, and in 2015, on the centennial anniversary, commemorative ceremonies were held to honor the victims and raise awareness of the historical event. The wreck of the Eastland was raised shortly after the disaster, sold, and converted into a gunboat named USS Wilmette, serving the U.S. Navy during World War I and World War II. The ship was eventually scrapped in 1947. Although its physical structure is gone, the tragedy continues to be studied by historians, maritime experts, and safety advocates as a stark reminder of the consequences of ignoring structural integrity and passenger limits. The SS Eastland disaster stands as a critical moment in American industrial and maritime history. Its circumstances highlight the intersection of corporate responsibility, federal regulation, and public safety. It also serves as a memorial to the lives lost in a preventable tragedy that changed shipboard policies and brought greater attention to the working-class communities that built early 20th century America. For enthusiasts of historical ephemera, visit history-collectors.com to find collectibles that might complement your collection. You can own a piece of history.